Amazing. Hi.
Greetings, everyone.
Professional. Dr. Kaufman, you're missing out. It looks amazing.
I'm sure it does. And yes.
Greetings, everyone, from the lovely city of Amsterdam, and thank you for being here today. Please post your comments and questions in the chat on the right. We will answer them at the end of the presentation during the QA session. Closed captions are also located on the right of the session player. You can use the green buttons to adjust the settings if you need to. You can hide the captions if you do not wish to see them by clicking the three dots right above the player and clicking Hide. Today, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Caroline L. Kaufman and Dr. Erica Newport. Dr. Caroline Kaufman is a social psychologist interested in the science of teaching and learning. She's an adjunct professor and general studies at Keiser University and a visiting professor of philosophy at the University of South Florida. Dr. Erica Newport is a communications interdisciplinary educator, speaker, and academic thought leader, specializing in general education, leadership, and 21st century educating. She studied at Keiser in 2016 prior to teaching doctorate students qualitative research and media studies at the City University, Hong Kong, and at the Shanghai, for me to say, Research Institute in China, while serving as a teaching and research fellow at the University of Florida via a National Science Foundation Fellowship, 2012-2018. In 2018, she was appointed General Education Interdisciplinary Studies Chair at KU, Newport, Richey. 1 year later, Newport secured the University Department Chair appointment for General Education Studies, overseeing 24 campuses. Today's topic will cover how engaging students in online learning improves when daily activities are tied to course content. This presentation offers practical examples of in-class activities translated into online formats using the Announcements tab. Data show a correlation between announcement posts and frequency of daily login sessions for students enrolled in online and hybrid undergraduate classes in general education. You will see examples of successful and unsuccessful posts, learn about different kinds of activities that can be built as announcements, and dive into how you can evaluate an engagement potential of a post. With that, I ask you to give your full attention to Dr. Kaufman and help me welcome her to the virtual stage. Dr.
Hello, I am Caroline Kaufman, and I hope you can hear me well. Thank you for joining us in this panel. Today, I want to translate what we all know about pedagogy in the physical classroom to the reality of online learning. One problem in this process is engaging students, the problem of engagement. How do we get the learner's attention and keep it when interacting in online learning systems? You know, people usually enjoy discussing topics relevant to their professional work. It's not hard to get a group of students in nursing or criminal justice or computer science to talk about what they're learning and applying in face-to-face interactions. But engagement in virtual conversation can sometimes be difficult. There are many reasons for this, and a full review of all the barriers to online learning are far beyond the scope of my presentation today. But what I want to do is remind us all first of what we already know about learning in any context and translate what we know to this novel experience of remote teaching in a virtual reality. Slide 2, please.
Ready.
Thank you. This is the famous classic Bloom taxonomy for learning. As we all know now, the Bloom taxonomy was developed by Benjamin Bloom and his colleagues in the 1940s. The revised version is what I'm showing here, and calling it the Revised Bloom Taxonomy, or RBT, for those of us who like acronyms. I want to stress that it's a cognitive model and it presents 6 stages of learning arranged in a hierarchy. The stages are continuous and progressively more difficult, beginning with remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, and create. Now, I'm going to focus mainly on the first 3 stages of learning because that's where we target our undergraduate classes in general education. May I have the next slide, please? This shows the colored version of the revised Bloom taxonomy, just because it's nice to see it all in color. Next slide, please. Bloom's taxonomy is based on action. The learners do something in their heads and with their hands in many, many cases. And active learning engages students physically and mentally. They manipulate things in the physical world, for example, section labs, in pottery class, in anatomy, what have you. But students are talking, touching, and they're engaging all of their senses in the learning process. So the input is multi-sensory, as originally envisioned in the 1940s and 50s, reading, writing, and also doing. And the action words call for each stage to be tied to something that we will be doing. So for remembering, we've got the notion of recall or recognize, as we do ask students to do when we give them a multiple choice test. We ask them to interpret, what does the knowledge mean? Can I put it in my own words? Can I paraphrase? And the third stage, can we implement something? Can we try to do something with this new knowledge? And then in the last two stages, we ask individuals to examine them critically, to critique. And then finally, at the top of the Bloom taxonomy, we have making something new or producing. That's the essence of the creative stage in this taxonomy. Now, these words that we're looking at now, the action words for learning, is in no way an exhaustive list. We use verbs and gerunds because that signals the learner at a cognitive level to do something central to the learning process. Again, hearkening back to the action aspects of this. Slide 5, please.
Ready.
Thank you. The work is cognitive. We're asking people to think, but we know from decades of research in cognitive psychology that cognitive work is also tied to physical action in very important ways, particularly when one is acquiring new knowledge. The learners have to think. They take in the words, they read, or the illustrations that are offered, and they work to remember these new facts. They begin constructing their cognitive map of knowledge. This is a difficult task. We know that. Next slide, please. But the learners do the work. Every element of instruction requires something from the students. They are active agents in the learning process. Particularly in adult and career-oriented education, learners bring a wealth of experience to the classroom, and they rely on that to remember and understand and interpret new knowledge. This is one of the joys, I think, of teaching adults in an online environment. They are eager, they have already have a wealth of experience to draw upon, and they want to see how that already existing knowledge can be remapped and rethought of in terms of the new knowledge base they're acquiring. So we begin difficult tasks with something that we already know and build out from the existing frameworks. But the agency always resides with the student. Now, why focus on announcements? In Blackboard, I think it's a handy function. It provides us with a daily opportunity to engage students in active learning. Yes, we also use them for administrative tasks, of course, but morning or evening messages that contain short tasks tied to course content can spark a learner's curiosity. With effective design, the morning announcement can be a wake-up call that says, let's think about this. Is it relevant to my life today or tomorrow? And maybe it might be fun. Let's give it a try. I have an example from a statistics class. If anyone who's teaching probability theory right now can draw on the oft-repeated examples from the epidemiological work that's going on now. What does it mean to say that a vaccine is 95% effective? What does it mean to say that we've had 6 cases reported in a sample of 40,000 people? Figure out the probabilities of that and use that as a way of balancing the risks and benefits of getting the vaccine or not. Now, this is only one example. With announcements, we can start each day with a question that engages students on a topical issue in tasks relevant both to their lives for that day and to what they're learning in their course content. I'd like the next slide, please. That's slide number 7. Thank you.
Ready?
Thank you. Now, here's an example of one announcement that's posted on the opening session of a general education course called Lifespan Development, where we've all brushed past that course content. Now, this particular course is a freshman level course with no prerequisites. Students take it to fulfill requirements for the associate's degree before moving on to their career courses in the health professions. So in this case, courses like this serve as the filter through which all students have to go through before they can continue with their upper division courses and complete their professional training. We have students in health professions and criminal justice and business and other degrees offered at Keiser. But because we have small classes, instructors can tailor the course material to fit the students. We have many students in nursing and allied health professions, and this course includes substantive issues relevant to healthcare. Many of our students work in nursing homes, assisted living facilities, or have taken care of older family members. And in that case, the announcement that we offer on the first day of class is relevant. I do hope the audio comes through. Is this? Are you hearing any music?
We're okay. We're good. Keep going.
Okay. This is essential. Had we got the correct connections? Yes?
We're good. Keep going. You're on slide number 7.
Okay, thank you. Slide number 7, yes. If you're hearing the music, it is the famous Beatles song, When I'm 64, which most of my students don't know about and don't even think it's a real song, but it is. And if you'll know the lyrics say, will you still need me when I'm 64? That's kind of funny because some of us, myself included, are way past 64. But let's go to the next slide, which is, and take a moment to read this. It's about 72 words long. How long will you live? Make your own best estimate. Search online for lifespan calculators. Pick 3 sites and calculate your life expectancy. Record the results from each of the 3 sites. Also, of course, record your own best estimate of how long you think you're going to live. And then examine what factors did each site use to calculate life expectancy. What factors did you think about when you were estimating your life expectancy? Explain the differences among the 4 estimates. And what could you change to improve your longevity? That is the announcement. Quick, simple. I think it would be a fun thing. Next slide, please.
Ready?
Thank you. Adults enjoy learning about themselves. Many students have never thought about their own mortality or the changes, physical, cognitive, and social, and economic, that unfold as we go through our lives. The human lifespan is long and getting longer if we play our cards correctly. So this is an issue that all of us are going to confront existentially, but many of us, particularly those of us who are younger, have not thought seriously about it. This announcement asks them to think about the human lifespan on a personal and a general level. Debriefing can be in class or online, but in this case, since this is an online class, we do it online through text. And the assessment of learning flows naturally from the exercise. supplemented by the assigned readings. Of course, they have to read a whole chapter on life expectancy and the factors that contribute to it. The students can identify at least 3 main factors that influence life expectancy. How does their own understanding of genetics and lifestyle affect them now and in the future? Are they doing now things that can affect their future longevity? And could they do anything to change it? Are they willing to change? This opens up a whole panoply of interesting things to talk about in class, and believe me, it gets them quite going. With this as a beginning, students become involved personally with the enterprise of learning, and the concepts become relevant beyond the immediate task of passing the test. Now let's move on to another example. The second example, let me talk to you a bit about the action words. What I've done here on this slide in the first example is to take, going back to the text of the announcements, picked out the verbs, and that's what we're supposed to do in applying the Bloom taxonomy, excuse me. Words like identify, select, estimate, calculate, record, explain, compare, and infer. And I've mapped it onto the RBT cognitive stage that seems to apply to it. So asking people to identify something, to select website, estimate life expectancies for more than one calculation, calculate, of course, record it, of course, explain how you got that answer, and compare and infer. It's interesting, and I think it helps us see how structuring an announcement like this maps onto what we believe to be the stages of cognitive development as people are acquiring new knowledge. Okay. Now let's move on to another example.
Example number 2, slide 10.
Thank you. This the kind of administrative thing that we're used to doing with Blackboard. The second example asks students to learn and apply APA 7th edition formatting to all their written assignments. It implies that we're supposed to do the written assignment, and the implication there can be problematic. Could make this a little more explicit. But the thought experiment for all of us right now is to think about how we can improve this. Next slide. It certainly points the student to the correct information, but in slide 11, at least on my counting, the actions in example 2, excuse me. I'm trying to do the same kind of mapping. We've got a list of action words, and I've identified 5 in this particular text, and then mapping it on the learning stage. The experiment is, in your own head, what are these actions, and who and what stage do they tend to map onto? Well, there are some problems, I think, with this. One feature is that this announcement doesn't make clear the request for action, clearly. Students are required to learn APA and format accordingly, and they're told to avoid plagiarism. But what are they supposed to do to avoid it? And the word itself strikes fear into the heart of many students, and fear inhibits active engagement with learning. Yes, as announcements go, this is a bit of a clunker, and I put it in here intentionally, but we've all seen them, we've all used them, and we all want to do a little bit better. So the thought exercise for us in the audience, for you all, is to take this task and rework it into an engaging task for learners. One possible way to change would be to make the learner the agent. The words require and format and expect are all things that the institution is making someone do, or setting up the expectations for the institution. So the evaluation side, the work is on the side of the institution. Did the student do it right? But could we turn that around by asking the students to do this because there's a reason behind it? So, for example, the reasoning behind the APA formatting, not maybe not the particulars of where you put the comma before or after the date, but crediting authors, identifying sources so others can read what was referenced, setting clear headings, good grammar and spelling. All these become part of the skill set of the professional and a point of pride in their work. And this is what we want students to learn. We do this, follow APA format or some clear formatting, because it signals immediately that we're talking to a professional person who knows what they're doing and can organize things. And avoidance is replaced with the notion of learning to paraphrase and take courage in explaining things in your own words. I close with a comparison now of physical realities and learning realities in learning. This is a transition to something that I consider now, if anyone's a past fan of Monty Python, now for something completely different but totally related. The next slide. Across the digital divide. How do we translate these actions from physical to virtual reality? Now, early on, I hinted that we take in cognitive ideas, but they're always attached to a multisensory motor experience. And as we're learning, that multisensory input becomes very important. All of us are engaged in teaching and learning, but we're hobbled across a digital divide. We're hobbling, if you will, across a digital divide from a world of action and multisensory experience into a virtual world. And that virtual world is different. It lacks the physical experience that mark the trails between constructions. We're engaged firsthand in a new reality. But it's just similar enough to make us feel like we should know what we're doing. But what we miss are the sights, the smells, the emotions that commonly tie words to actions, tie concepts to something that we can place in our heads. Students learning in a digital realm, must learn to translate the action words commonly used in real life to whatever they mean in virtual reality. So, next slide, please. Let's try translating these action words. And I want to begin by reminding us of the need to make the ontological commitment. Now, what is that? Well, going to the library. Start with an example. In the 20th century, that meant a host of physical actions that are absent in library searches in the 21st century online. Now, going to the library means accessing the website, locating the database, constructing a search query, all of those things. And a host of other actions that involve very little physical movement when we actually think about it, and provide few changes in sensory experiences. We are still sitting in a chair, looking at a screen, moving our mouse, what have you. What we've done is type, click, look, read, and all in this restricted physical space. Now, the ontological commitment means that when you're going into a certain version of reality, we first acknowledge that we're making this journey, that we're in, we acknowledge the reality base that in which we are operating, and accept a set of symbols defined in reference to, in this case, the virtual experience. The cognitive processes identified in the classic taxonomy of learning are separated from physical experiences in significant ways, and we do ourselves a service by acknowledging that and allowing that translation to take place. So, for example, in physical reality, according to the Bloom taxonomy, we might be talking about remembering. In virtual reality, we're accessing a database. I'm so happy that Google is available, yes, to recall all of the things I don't have to have in my head immediately because I know where to find it. We're learning how to move in both domains of action, in online learning and in education, higher education. Students are learning both the content of a knowledge base and the skill required to access and use it. Some students are cued into this already. They're knowledgeable users. They can navigate any web pattern pattern you give them, and they can move readily from one platform to another. But some don't. And in my educational experience, many of them don't. And sometimes we are all assuming that we should know this, and we just don't. The difference, however, is that when we translate, we need to be able to if we are understanding what we mean, is we're going to assign some kind of key word that will call up a definitional set that will explain what we mean. And applying, in physical reality, we actually are applying something to solve a problem. In virtual reality, we're doing various versions of running a program. Next slide, please. I'm getting to the end of this. I want to talk just briefly about the difference between skills versus knowledge. And we all know this. We've learned this as part of our bread and butter. But when we're teaching online, we are assuming a skill set. And in many cases, we are in the process of teaching students the skill set that they need. But skills, we know, require practice. They require rehearsal, physical repetition. Do it over and over again. Know where the icon is, click it, right click, left click, point to the right screen. And it also involves some degree of motor ability. And we know, for example, for those of us who have learned or tried to learn how to hit a baseball, we know that we practice years and years before we can establish that hand-eye coordination, the physical movement, and all of that to be able to hit a baseball. Knowledge is a little bit different. It's information. It's theoretical, it's cognitive, and it involves memory. Our students, sometimes ourselves also, get lost in the translations that are not tethered to bodily sensations or to multisensory inputs. As a result, students risk becoming disoriented, disengaged, frustrated. Announcements are a first invitation. They're a way of extending the invitation to re-engage in both through a cognitive task that also requires multisensory exploration. Now, the last slide. I'm leaving this very open-ended. Embodied learning. We are embodied learners, and we're trying to stuff all of our potential into some narrow physical channels, and we are getting a little bit tied up in it, but we can practice our way through it. The younger generation, it takes their reality for granted. Punching something on a screen is just as real as building something with blocks. So I want to thank you. I'll leave you with this thought. It's attributed to D.H. Lawrence. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he said that we are trees and our roots are planted in the air. I think that's what we're dealing with right now. We're basically oaks, and we're sort of encouraging ourselves to become air ferns, and it takes a little practice. Thank you all for listening to this. I hope that it's been at least engaging for all of you. And now I turn the screen over to Dr. Erica Newport. She's our Department Chair of General Education at Keiser and an expert in the art and science of communications. Welcome, Dr. Newport.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaufman. What I just loved about that has been kind of an example of the past year working during a pandemic era when things don't necessarily go as planned, and Dr. Kaufman was completely ready to present, but we had to stream her in through an iPhone instead. So awesome job. Thank you so much. Okay, so welcome. I am here from Keiser University. I hail from University of Florida, so go Gators if there's any Gator fans in the audience. And I'm the university chair, which means I oversee curriculum and accreditation for 24 campuses, which is about 700 general education professors, mathematics, social science, applied sciences, English, writing, communications, the best one, communications, of course. And during the past year, we tried to figure out really innovative, creative ways to connect with our faculty and to train them in Blackboard, but to especially give them tools to use announcements. And so when we first entered into COVID-19 stages and our professors found themselves going from on ground on 24 campuses to online literally overnight, I was trying to think of some ways that we could really connect with our faculty and get them inspired and rallied around how we are now going to be online. This is going to be our virtual studio. Welcome to the comm studio for my case, but for everyone else, it could be the science lab. It might be your psychology studio. But I really believed in announcements as well. So I started training my faculty in the art of using announcements to be very hyper visual and to connect the dots between our students who are going from a cultural experience of watching Netflix or being in gaming or being in virtual reality or possibly texting or being in Facebook or whatever it is, and making sure that they don't feel that they're so disconnected from their cultural experiences to their classes. So here's a little podcast that I created. It starts out by talking about the podcast for our Teaching and Learning Center at Keiser University, which is run by our Chancellor, Dr. Stabile, and 3 minutes long. So we talk about the podcast, and then we move into announcements. It's silly, it's fun, it's high energy. It's really meant to get the attention of the faculty. And yes, I'm totally fine making a fool of myself if the faculty get on board and they're excited about what they do. So let's tune into that. And I'm going to stream my podcast right now.
Extraordinary teaching in a not so ordinary time. Hey there, it's Dr. Erica Newport, and this is our new KU Extraordinary Teaching and Learning podcast, launched just for you Seahawk professors instructing remotely with some serious heart and mind. Hear ye, hear ye. I have an announcement to make. But first, a public service blurb. This bi-weekly podcast, a TLC initiative, thank you, Dr. Christopher Stabile, is for professors running low on time and high on hope for virtual learning. Last episode, your statement of teaching philosophy as a pedagogical engagement online tool landed that document buried deep in your laptop, front and center in your Blackboard course. Today's episode, hello, announcement section in your Blackboard course, an understated communication tool, might I add, that Cornell University's Blackboard resource says delivers a serious punch to remind students about everything from assignments, due dates, course changes, cancellations, workshops, professors' lifetime, surveys, and even university events. Announcements are organized by date, displayed on the home page of the course. P.S. The main page is in the course site. And you get posting choices. Is it permanent, people, or restricted by assigned dates to announcement? Northern Illinois University Center for Innovative TLC takes announcements into the Marie Kondo tidy up mode. Draft announcements in Word and save to a folder for future use. Double trouble? Post an announcement and email out to students as well. Don't make that announcement permanent. The idea is to train your students to check announcements daily and to make sure the latest announcements are featured, which Blackboard will do for you automatically through default. If you are referencing an assignment post, link it up to an actual post in your Blackboard weeks. Beam them over, Scotty, to assignment. Hello. And don't forget that if you raise the engagement bar with your students to tune in daily, give them a reason to do so by communicating effectively. And why not through announcement post? Extraordinary teaching in a not so ordinary time? Announce it already.
What are you doing, honey? I'm stuck in the sleep.
Okay, so Lucas, are we off screen and the podcast is out? Good. Okay, so what I want to do now before we actually go into the presentation is show you a few samples of what I've done in my classes at the university during the pandemic time, and especially using the tools in Blackboard, but using visuals and connectivity and super fun stuff to ensure that our students who are taking speech, interpersonal communication, writing for managers, etc., really have an awesome experience from the time they log into their Blackboard course. So let's take a minute here to look at the first class, which would be speech communication. I'm just going to kind of walk you through what my announcements look like and how I've used creativity the most I can with our Blackboard portal to connect our students on a daily basis throughout the day to their course content. I'm going to first share my speech class. And you should be seeing it now. Okay, good. So at the end of the class, I love giving them a really exciting experience by saying, hey, we did it, we got through it, a little quote about something inspiring. I love Oprah. All day long, I'll post that at the end of the class. And so I also send this out as a meme over text message to my students. So this is something that they're going to see in week 4, which is the end of our course. They're going to see it in announcements, and they're also going to have it on their cell phone. So it creates a really connective experience. I have asked them to fill out the end of course survey here. So it's not just a link to the end of course survey. It's something that they feel like, okay, cool, this is kind of fun. There's my professor again. And I'm kind of excited about filling out the survey at the end, even though I'm completely exhausted after a 4-week intensive class. I make a checklist for my students that I post in week 4 too, but I first post it in announcements. The announcements goes out over email. It also gets posted in their announcement section in Blackboard. And what's really cool about that is that my students are trained to go to announcements first. Sometimes when you take a class that is 4 months long and you break it down into a 1-month class, it can be super overwhelming for our students. So if they know to go to the announcements section and see everything they need to do throughout the day, which also, if you can see here, links to the week and to the actual posting, it makes life so much easier for students who are learning virtually and learning during a crisis situation such as COVID-19. So yeah, I love my cats. I don't know if I have any cat people in the audience. I hope I do. But I regularly talk about my cats, so I connect them to me as someone who loves my animals, and it gives that human connection to their professor and in their course. Okay, so another assignment, my students actually create podcasts in my speech class. So there's the deadline. We're talking about what the components are. Here's another link to a TED Talk, Brene Brown. Who doesn't love Dr. Brene Brown? But before I actually go into Brene Brown's TED Talk in week 3 or 4, I'm actually listing it in the announcements section. Okay, and this is not to make you dizzy, but you can see here, all of my students are totally obsessed with Lego. And Lego offers a really cool opportunity, not just to play with it in the class and while you're virtually, but to connect the students to that visual image of fun, of play, and of connectivity. So I will actually take a photo of a Lego set that I'm working with for my students and post it in announcements. We have another TED Talk there for them to learn because they're going to be doing a TED Talk at the end of the actual class. Yeah, I have an early bird class and a night owl happy hour for my students to learn virtually, so I put it there. And if you can see this image right here, it says, "This is my happy place, the art of public speaking." So I take a picture of myself often either with something that we're working on in our classes, such as my podcasting material, or possibly our TED Talk stage, or in this case, my bookshelf where I would teach some of my classes, just talking about, hey, this is super fun. Let's go to week 4 and check it out. I always post a schedule in my announcement the first week of every class. So they know what the schedule is to learn virtually, to learn on ground if you're hybrid remote, or to have mentoring, tutoring, or some empowerment work. We're going to come back to the empowerment work for my presentation, but I post that here and I try to be really creative. I love the science kitty. Sorry. Yes, my PhD took forever at UF and it was the most amazing experience ever. I got to go to Hong Kong to defend it and to Shanghai. And so I kind of relate my dissertation experience with my students in my class, and we have a lot of fun with that. When I send out an email to them through the portal, I want them to know, hey, you've got mail, check it out. But I'll also post it in announcements to let them know you've got mail. And they always recognize this little icon. And then that will take them directly to the link here, as you can see, that they need to read their email and do the quiz. Okay, so ideation, creativity, and storytelling. I talk a lot about storytelling and ideation in all of my communication classes. I'm not going to tell them about the entire assignment or lecture that we're going to be doing. What I'm going to do instead is just kind of give them a little bit of a blurb for them to look at, something visual, and then connect them on. Okay, so we have media. When I post media, this is the icon that I use. This icon will also stream into the week that the students are going to look at when they actually take a look at the media that I am using for our lecture. And so as we go down, you'll kind of see that I'm really using the same kind of visuals that link to the type of information that is posted in the weeks. But sometimes when I'm out and about and I see something really cool that I think my students would absolutely be obsessed with, I take a photo of it, and then I make a meme. Now, this meme right here is telling them, hey, don't forget about my happy hour. It's coming up at 8:30. So I take this meme, post it in announcements. I post it in Keiser Live in our Blackboard shell where our students connect virtually. And then I send this meme out to their text messages so that they know, hey, don't forget to tune in. We have class tonight. And kind of wrapping down to the end, as you can see here, I've made this fabulous little fun photo of their professor hanging out at Universal. Sorry, this is live from Florida. So yeah, we used to go to Universal prior to COVID-19. But this is the image that I tell them, hey,